The conference room on the 45th floor of the Apex Tower was designed to make you feel small. That was the point. It was a glass cage floating in the clouds, disconnected from the grime of the city below, air-conditioned to a sterile, bone-chilling 68 degrees. The table was a slab of reclaimed Californian redwood, 12 feet long, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the fluorescent lights like accusing eyes. I sat at one end, my hands resting on the cool wood. My knuckles were swollen. Arthritis, the doctor said, but I knew it was just the accumulation of 40 years of typing. 40 years of turning logic into syntax. 40 years of building the invisible skeleton that held this entire company upright. Jason sat at the other end. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. It was Italian, midnight blue, cut slim to hide the fact that he was 46 years old and softening around the middle. He had dyed his hair again. The gray at his temples, which had been there last week, was gone, replaced by a uniform, unnatural chestnut brown. He was tapping a Mont Blanc pen against a leather notebook, a nervous tic he had developed back in the garage days when we were terrified we wouldn't make payroll. But he wasn't terrified today. He was impatient. "We need to talk about the future, Bill," Jason said. He used his visionary voice. It was a tone he had perfected over 2 decades of TED Talks, CNBC interviews, and board meetings. It was smooth, projected from the diaphragm, and utterly devoid of human warmth. "I'm listening," I said. My voice was different. It was gravelly quiet. It was the voice of a man who spent his life talking to machines, not microphones. Jason stopped tapping the pen. He clasped his hands together and leaned forward, attempting to simulate intimacy. "Omni Logistics is serious," he said. "The diligence team is wrapping up next week. The offer is on the table. $500 million. All cash." "I know the number, Jason," I said. I read the term sheet. "Right, the term sheet." Jason sighed, a theatrical exhale that signaled he was about to deliver bad news disguised as wisdom. "The thing is, Bill, Omni is buying a brand. They're buying a vision of the future. They're buying AI. They're buying next gen." He paused, waiting for me to fill the silence. I didn't. I just watched him. I watched the way his eyes flicked to the window, avoiding mine. "The feedback from their team," he continued, "is that our leadership structure feels heavy, traditional." "You mean old?" I said. Jason flinched. "I mean static. Look, you built the foundation. Nobody disputes that. You're the Wozniak to my jobs. But we aren't building circuit boards in a garage anymore. We're building a neural network for the global supply chain. We need speed. We need agility. And, frankly," he reached into his leather portfolio and pulled out a thick document. He slid it across the table. It hissed softly against the varnish, coming to a stop exactly 3 inches from my hand. "They want to refresh," Jason said. "They want the dinosaur DNA out of the gene pool before the clone happens." I looked down at the document. The cover page was heavy, cream-colored stock. Separation agreement and general release. William J. Reynolds. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to read the legalese to know what it said. It was a bullet to the back of the head, delivered in Times New Roman. "You're firing me," I said. "We're transitioning you," Jason corrected quickly. "It's a buyout. A golden handshake. Look at the terms, Bill. Full vesting on your remaining options. 2 years of salary continuation. We're keeping you on the health plan until you're 65. It's generous. It's incredibly generous. I don't want the money, Jason. I want to work. I'm in the middle of the server migration." "The server migration is being handled," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "I hired a new CTO, Tyler. He's ex-Google. He's 28. He's a wizard with Rust and Go. He's already auditing your legacy code." "My legacy code," I repeated. "You mean the kernel? The thing that actually makes the trucks move? The thing that nobody else can read?" Jason snapped. The mask slipped for a second. The resentment bubbled up. The resentment of the salesman who relies on a magician he doesn't understand. "It's a black box, Bill. It's a liability. Tyler is going to refactor it. He's going to put it in the cloud, wrap it in an API, and let the AI handle the routing." I almost laughed. Let the AI handle it. Jason thought algorithms were magic spells. He thought you just sprinkled machine learning on a logistics problem and the trucks would drive themselves. He didn't understand that the kernel wasn't just code. It was 20 years of edge cases. It was the mathematical solution to the traveling salesman problem, optimized for fuel weight, driver fatigue, and traffic patterns, written in assembly language so efficient it ran on hardware that cost less than his lunch. Tyler is going to crash the system, I said calmly. Tyler is the future. Jason raised his voice, the echo bouncing off the glass walls. And you are the past. Look at you, Bill. You're wearing a polo shirt from a conference in 2004. You sit in your office with the door closed. You don't use Slack. You don't come to the culture mixers. You're a ghost haunting the building. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the skyline he felt he owned. The Omni deal requires a management restructure prior to closing, he said, his back to me. It's a condition of a sale. If you're on the org chart, the deal dies. If the deal dies, the stock tanks. If the stock tanks, everyone loses. The employees, the investors. He turned back. I'm not letting you sink this ship just because you're too stubborn to retire. Sign a paper, Bill. Go play golf. Buy a boat. Be a grandfather. And if I don't, Jason's face hardened. The visionary vanished. The shark appeared. Then we terminate for cause, he said coldly. Inability to adapt to new technologies. Negligence. We'll find something. We'll drag your name through the mud. We'll tie up your equity in litigation for a decade. You'll spend the rest of your life paying lawyers instead of enjoying your millions. He pointed at the pen lying on the table, a heavy black Mont Blanc. Do the smart thing. For once in your life, stop being an engineer and be a businessman. I looked at the pen. I looked at the agreement. I thought about the garage. I remember the smell of ozone and stale pizza. I remember Jason sleeping on a pile of packing blankets while I debugged the routing protocol at 4 a.m. I remembered the morning the code finally compiled without errors. I remembered shaking him awake, shouting, "It works! It works!" I remembered him hugging me, tears in his eyes, saying, "We did it, Bill. We're partners. 50-50. Forever." Forever had lasted exactly 22 years. I felt a cold calmness wash over me. It was the same feeling I got when a server cluster overheated or a database corrupted. Panic is useless. Emotion is noise. You have to look at the system. You have to find the leverage point. Jason thought the leverage was the money. He thought the leverage was the job title. He had forgotten the paperwork. He had forgotten that in 1998, I wasn't just a coder. I was a paranoid divorce with a shark of a lawyer named Saul who told me, "Never put the crown jewels in the castle if you don't own the keys." I reached out and picked up the pen. It was heavy, balanced, expensive. "You're right, Jason," I said softly. Jason blinked. The tension in his shoulders dropped instantly. I'm tired, I lied. I'm tired of the noise. I'm tired of trying to explain to Tyler why latency matters. Maybe it is time. It is, Jason said, rushing back to the table, eager to close the sale. It really is. You've earned this, Bill. You've earned the rest. I flipped to the signature page. William J. Reynolds, Chief Technology Officer. I signed my name. The ink flowed wet and black. "There," I said, capping the pen. "Done." I pushed the document back to him. Jason smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. The smile of a man who just dodged a bullet. He reached out to shake my hand. "Thank you, Bill. You're doing the right thing. We'll throw you a party. A big send-off. Friday." "No party," I said, standing up. My knees popped. "I'll just pack my box." Sure. Low key. That's you." He was already checking his watch, already mentally moving on to his lunch meeting with the Omni bankers. "I'll have HR process the wire transfer. You'll see the severance in your account by morning. Take care of the machine, Jason," I said. "It's fragile." "It's in the cloud, Bill," he laughed. "It's indestructible." I turned and walked out. The walk through the office was a surreal procession. I passed the rows of open-plan desks. I saw the collaboration zones. I saw the young engineers in their hoodies and noise-canceling headphones, staring at screens, moving widgets around, adjusting colors, optimizing user flows. They had no idea. They didn't know that beneath this sleek UI, beneath the cloud integrations, beneath the shiny dashboard that the customers saw, there was a beast, a single, monolithic executable file compiled in 1998. The kernel. It lived in a virtual container now, buried deep in the server architecture, untouched and unloved. It did the heavy lifting. It calculated the routes. It solved the math. And they didn't know who owned it. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, shutting out the hum of the office. I was alone. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't text my wife. She was long gone, another casualty of the startup life. I didn't text my kids. I opened a terminal emulator app one had written myself. It connected via an encrypted SSH tunnel to a private server rack in the basement of my house. I typed in a query license_status, target Apex_master. The screen pulsed for a second. Then the text scrolled up, bright green against the black background. Connection established. License holder, Reynolds W. License type, revocable/employment contingent. Status, active. Last handshake, for a clock universal time coordinated. I stared at the words, employment contingent. It was the Sol clause. The license to use the kernel is granted to the company solely on the condition of the licensor's continued active employment. Upon termination of employment, for any reason, the license shall remain valid for a transition period of 30 days. Thereafter, the license shall automatically expire unless renewed in writing by the licensor. 30 days. Jason had just fired me. The clock had started ticking the moment I signed that paper. I wasn't going to tell him. If I told him now, he would sick his lawyers on me. He would file an injunction. He would force me to keep the lights on. He would claim critical infrastructure. But if I waited until the 30 days ran out, until the contract expired naturally, then I wasn't the aggressor. I was just a vendor whose contract had ended. And the Omni Logistics deal was scheduled to close in 45 days. The elevator dinged at the lobby. The doors opened onto the marble floor. I walked out into the sunlight of the city. I took a deep breath. It smelled of exhaust and coffee and freedom. Jason thought he had just cleared the deck for his $100 million payday. He thought he had removed the obstacle. He didn't realize he had just unplugged the life support system. And the battery backup had exactly 30 days of charge left. My house sits on a ridge overlooking the Silicon Valley smog. It's a modern glass box, the kind of place real estate agents call an architectural statement and normal people call cold. I bought it 10 years ago when the Series C funding round closed. It was supposed to be a trophy. It was supposed to be the place where my wife and I raised our kids and hosted dinner parties for the board. Now, it's just a server room with a bedroom attached. My wife left 3 years ago, taking the kids and the dog. She said I loved the code more than I loved her. She wasn't wrong. The code never asked me to talk about my feelings, and the code never threatened to leave me if I worked late. The code was loyal. I pulled my Volvo into the garage, parking next to the empty spot where a Porsche should be. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence for a long time. The house was quiet. No kids running around. No TV blaring. Just the hum of the HVAC system and the distant, rhythmic whir of cooling fans from my study. I walked inside, threw my keys on the granite island in the kitchen, and poured 3 fingers of Macallan 18. I didn't drink it immediately. I held the glass up to the light, watching the amber liquid settle. Jason was probably popping champagne right now. He was probably standing on a table in the break room, telling the ninjas that the dinosaur was gone, that the path to the future was clear, that everyone was going to be rich. I took a sip. It burned. Good. I walked into my study. This was the nerve center. Wall-to-wall bookshelves filled with manuals on Unix, TCP, IP protocols, and graph theory. In the corner stood a server rack, black steel, blinking lights, bolted to the floor. This wasn't company hardware. This was mine. It ran on a separate fiber line I paid for personally. This rack hosted the Sentinel. To understand the trap I had just set, you have to understand the architecture of Apex systems. When I built the kernel in 1998, the internet was a fragile place. Connectivity was spotty. I needed a way to ensure that if someone stole our software, if they copied the binary onto a floppy disk and ran on a competitor server, it wouldn't work. So I built a heartbeat. Every morning at 4 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, the Apex Central Cluster wakes up. It compiles the daily routing manifest. But before it calculates a single mile of trucking routes, it sends a tiny, encrypted packet of data out to the internet. It pings a specific IP address. My IP address. The message is simple. Authorization_request. My server, the Sentinel, receives the request. It checks a database. Is the license active? Is the bill paid? Is the user authorized? If the answer is yes, it sends back a 64-bit encryption key. The kernel uses that key to unlock the routing algorithm for exactly 24 hours. If the answer is no, the kernel stays locked. The trucks don't move. I sat down at my desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. It was filled with hanging files. Tax returns 2015. Divorce settlement. Medical records. I pushed them aside until I found the one at the very back. It was a manila folder, tattered at the edges, labeled simply, Apex/Original Incorporation. I opened it. The smell of old paper drifted up, a dry, dusty scent that reminded me of the garage. I pulled out the operating agreement of Apex Systems, LLC, dated August 14, 1998. I flipped to page 12. Section 4.2. Intellectual Property Rights. I ran my finger down the paragraph. I knew it by heart, but reading it felt like prayer. The core routing algorithm, defined as the kernel, shall remain the sole personal property of William J. Reynolds. The company is granted a non-exclusive, royalty-free license to utilize the kernel for the duration of Reynolds' employment. And then, the kicker. Section 4.2, B termination. Upon the termination of Reynolds' employment for any reason, whether voluntary or involuntary, the license shall remain in effect for a transition period of 30 days. Upon the expiration of the transition period, the license shall automatically terminate unless a new licensing agreement is negotiated and executed in writing. There was the Saul clause. My old lawyer, Saul, was a paranoid genius. He smoked cheap cigars and wore suspenders. He told me, "Bill, partners are like spouses. They love you until the money gets big. Then they resent you. Keep the keys to the car in your pocket." Jason had signed this. He had signed it 22 years ago, hungover from celebrating our first angel investment check. He hadn't read it. He just wanted to deposit the money. I looked at the calendar on my wall. Today was October 15th. 30 days from today was November 14th. The Omni Logistics acquisition, the deal that was going to make Jason a king, was scheduled to close on November 18th. The timing was almost supernatural. If the license expired on the 14th, the system would crash 4 days before the check cleared. Omni Logistics wouldn't be buying a company. They would be buying a crime scene. I turned to my computer. I opened the terminal connected to the Sentinel. Currently, the status read, auto_renew, on. I typed the command. My hands didn't shake. Set auto_renew equals off. Set expiration_date equals November 14th, 2023. The screen blinked. Warning, license will expire in 30 days. This action is irreversible without admin override. Proceed? Y/N. I typed Y. Confirmed. Countdown initiated. I sat back. It was done. The bomb was armed. The fuse was burning. And nobody could hear the hissing except me. The next week was a study in absurdity. I was legally unemployed, but I couldn't look away. I spent my days monitoring the internal chatter of the company I used to run. I still had access to the sysadmin backdoors. Not the official accounts. Jason had revoked those within 10 minutes of me leaving the building. But I had built the network. I knew the service accounts. I knew the hidden subdomains. I could read the logs. I watched the new Apex take shape. Jason promoted a kid named Tyler to CTO. Tyler was 28. He had a resume full of buzzwords: Agile, Scrum Master, Cloud Native. He had previously worked at a social media startup that failed after 6 months. I read Tyler's internal emails. They were painful. From Tyler, CTO, to engineering all subject, breaking the monolith. Team, it's time to move fast and break things. The legacy code, the kernel, is a bottleneck. It's written in archaic C++ and runs on bare metal. We're going to containerize it. We're going to wrap it in a REST API. We're going to migrate everything to AWS by the end of the month. I laughed out loud in my empty study. Move fast and break things. It was a great motto for a photo sharing app. It was a terrible motto for a system that managed 40,000 tons of freight moving at 70 miles per hour on the interstate. Tyler didn't understand that the kernel had to run on bare metal. The latency of a virtualized cloud environment would add milliseconds to the calculation. When you're routing 10,000 trucks, those milliseconds compound into hours of delay. But I let them work. I watched Tyler's team build wrappers around my code. They were building a beautiful, modern dashboard on top of an engine they didn't have the keys to start. On Tuesday of the second week, I decided to go back. I needed to retrieve a few personal items I had left behind, photos of the kids, my frame patent, a specific soldering station I liked. But really, I wanted to see the arrogance up close. I wanted to verify that they were truly as blind as I thought. I drove to the tower. I parked in the visitor lot. My old spot, reserved CTO, had already been painted over. It now read reserved, expectant mothers. I walked into the lobby. The receptionist was new. She didn't know me. Name? She asked, popping gum. Bill Reynolds, I said. I'm here to pick up some boxes. She checked a list. I don't see you on the active employee list. I'm a visitor, I said. She printed a sticky badge. Visitor. She slapped it on the counter. I took the elevator up. The doors opened, and I stepped into a different world. The walls were gone. My office, the corner office with the view, was gutted. The door was off the hinges. There were beanbag chairs inside. Someone had written mindfulness zone on the glass in dry erase marker. I found Jason standing in the middle of the chaos, holding a blueprint and pointing. He looked energized. He looked younger. He saw me and jogged over, beaming. Bill, good to see you. How's the golf? I don't golf, Jason, I said, peeling the visitor badge off my chest and sticking it in my pocket. Just came for my things. Right. HR packed them up. They're in the loading dock, he said. Then he lowered his voice, acting conspiratorial. Look at this place, Bill. We're tearing down the silos. Tyler has the team moving at light speed. We're deploying code 3 times a day now. 3 times a day, I repeated. That sounds risky. It's agile, Jason corrected. Ami loves it. Their diligence team is blown away. They said our velocity metrics are off the charts. Did they look at the kernel? I asked. The black box. Jason laughed. They asked about it. Tyler told them we're deprecating it. We're going to replace it with an AI model next quarter. Omni is thrilled. They want the IP for the AI, not the old legacy junk. My heart skipped a beat. They want the IP for the AI. They were buying a fantasy. There was no AI. Tyler was just promising one. They were paying $500 million for a PowerPoint presentation and a legacy backend that was about to self-destruct. Well, I said, good luck with the AI. You should come to the closing party, Jason said, clapping me on the shoulder. Seriously, November 18th. We're renting out the rooftop bar. It's going to be a celebration of the future. It will mean a lot if you were there. Closure. I might be busy, I said. Busy doing what? Watching the sunset, I said. I walked toward the loading dock. On my way, I passed the server room. The glass walls were tinted, but I could see the racks. I could see the lights blinking. Amber, green, amber, green. It was hypnotic. It was the heartbeat of the company. I saw a young guy, presumably Tyler, standing inside the server room with a laptop plugged into the main switch. He was wearing a beanie. He looked confused. I paused for a second. Tyler looked up, saw me staring, and gave me a confused look. He mouthed, "Can I help you?" I shook my head and kept walking. He didn't know it, but he was trying to hotwire a car that was rigged to explode. I got my box from the dock. It was heavy. I carried it to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and checked my phone. The date was October 25th. 20 days left. I drove home. The anticipation was starting to physically hurt. It was a tight knot on my chest. It wasn't guilt. I had moved past guilt the moment Jason called me a dinosaur. It was the tension of the sniper waiting for the target to cross the street. The next 2 weeks blurred. The stock market rumors swirled. Omni Logistics to acquire Apex Systems. The share price jumped 10%. My severance package, which was tied to the stock value, increased by $500,000. Jason was getting richer by the minute. On paper, I received a generic email from HR. Subject, Cobra Benefits Information. Body, Dear William Reynolds, This letter is to confirm that your employment terminated on October 15th. Your company-sponsored life insurance has lapsed. I printed it out. I added it to the manila folder. Evidence. November 13th arrived. The day before the drop. I spent the day in my garden. I pruned the roses. I cleaned the gutters. I did manual labor to keep my mind off the clock. At 6 p.m., I went into my study. I logged into the Sentinel. Countdown, 16 hours. The system was ready. At 10 a.m. tomorrow, exactly 30 days from the minute I signed the separation agreement, the server would reject the handshake. I checked the Apex public status page one last time. System status, healthy active trucks, 14,203 packages in transit, 4.1 million on-time delivery rate, 98.4%. It was a marvel of engineering. It was the most efficient logistics network in human history. And tomorrow, it was going to stop dead. I poured myself another Macallan. I sat in the dark, watching the green cursor blink. I wasn't doing this for money. I already had money. I wasn't doing this for fame. I hated fame. I was doing this for the one thing Jason never understood. Respect. Respect for the code. Respect for the architecture. Respect for the fact that you can't build a skyscraper on a foundation of lies and expect it to stand when the wind blows. I went to sleep. I woke up at 9 a.m. on November 14th. I showered. I shaved. I put on a crisp white shirt and a blazer. I made a pot of coffee. I walked into the study at 9:55 a.m. Countdown, 5 minutes. I opened my email client. I had the draft ready. To Jason Sterling, CEO, legal at omnilogistics.com subject. Notice of license expiration. It was short. It was brutal. It attached the 1998 agreement. I watched the clock. 9 hours, 59 minutes, and 50 seconds. 9 hours, 59 minutes, and 55 seconds, 10 hours. On the terminal screen, a line of red text appeared. Status update. License expired. Action. Key revocation. Sentinel, locked. I hit send on the email. Then, I switched tabs to the Apex status page. For a moment, nothing happened. The map was still full of green dots. The cache was holding. Then I saw it. A truck in Ohio turned red. Then a distribution center in Memphis went offline. Then a cascade of errors swept across the screen like a digital plague. Error 500. Routing kernel unreachable. Error 403. License invalid. Critical failure. The map turned from green to a sea of angry, blinking crimson. My phone rang. It was Jason. I let it ring. The phone on my desk buzzed like an angry hornet trapped against glass. It was vibrating so hard it was slowly migrating across the polished oak surface, inching toward the edge. Caller ID, Jason Sterling. I didn't pick it up. I didn't silence it. I just watched it. There's a specific kind of satisfaction in watching a man realize he has stepped off a cliff, especially when he spent the last 6 months telling you gravity was a myth. I turned my eyes back to the monitor. The Apex status dashboard, the single pane of glass that Jason loved to show off to investors, was hemorrhaging red ink. Cluster A, East Coast critical failure. Cluster B, Midwest critical failure. Cluster C, West Coast critical failure. The map of the United States, usually a beautiful, flowing web of green logistic lines, looked like a crime scene. 14,000 trucks were currently pulling over to the shoulders of highways from Maine to California. Their onboard computers, which relied on a handshake with the kernel every 60 seconds to update their routing, had gone dark. Warehouses were freezing operations because they couldn't scan barcodes. The entire vascular system of the supply chain had just suffered a massive cardiac arrest. The phone stopped ringing. 3 seconds later, it started again. Caller ID, Jason Sterling. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm, but it tasted like victory. I imagined the scene inside the Apex Tower right now. I pictured Tyler, the 28-year-old CTO, in his beanie, staring at a terminal window that was spitting out error 403. License invalid messages. He would be typing furiously, try to restart the services. He would be trying to bypass the check. But he wouldn't be able to. I had written the Sentinel protocol using a 4096-bit RSA encryption key. The handshake relied on thermal noise entropy generated by the specific hardware sensors in my basement rack. You couldn't spoof it. You couldn't hack it. Unless you had the private key, which was currently sitting on a USB drive in my pocket, you were locked out. The phone stopped ringing again. Then, the landline rang. I raised an eyebrow. The landline number was restricted. Only 3 people had it. My ex-wife, who only called when she needed money, my daughter, who was in med school, and the Apex Board of Directors emergency line. I picked it up on the 3rd ring. Reynolds, I said. My voice was calm, flat, contrasting sharply with the chaotic energy I knew was on the other end. Bill, is that you? It wasn't Jason. It was Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was the chairwoman of the board. She was tough, seasoned, and usually unflappable. Today, she sounded like she was standing on the deck of the Titanic, looking for a lifeboat. "Hello, Sarah," I said. "How are you? How am I?" She nearly screamed. "Bill, the entire network is down. We are dark. The Omni Logistics diligence team is in the conference room right now for the final audit. The system crashed right in front of them." "That's unfortunate timing," I said. "Unfortunate? It's catastrophic. Tyler says it's a malicious attack. He says someone remote wiped the license keys. He says it's coming from your IP address." "Tyler is half right," I said. "It is coming from my IP address. But it's not an attack, Sarah. It's an expiration." "What are you talking about?" "Check your email, Sarah. I sent a notice to the board 5 minutes ago. Did you receive it?" There was a pause. I heard the frantic clicking of a mouse. Then a sharp intake of breath. "The 1998 agreement?" she whispered. "What is this?" "It's the contract that Jason signed when we founded the company," I explained, leaning back in my chair. "Specifically, Section 4.2. The intellectual property rights to the kernel, the engine that runs your entire company, belong to me. Apex Systems was merely a licensee. That license was contingent on my employment. But we own the code." Sarah stammered. "We paid you a salary." "You pay me a salary to maintain the code," I corrected. "You didn't pay me for the asset. The asset was licensed. And the contract states that if I am terminated, the license expires after a 30-day transition period." I looked at the clock. That period ended 11 minutes ago. "This is blackmail." Sarah shouted. "You can't do this. We have perishable goods on those trucks. We have contracts. It's not blackmail, Sarah. It's contract law. I didn't turn it off to hurt you. I turned it off because you stopped paying the rent. You fired the landlord, but you kept living in the house." "Bill, please," she said, her voice shaking. "Turn it back on. We can discuss this. We can negotiate. But you have to turn it back on now. The Omni lawyers are asking questions. If they find out the IP is disputed, they will find out," I said. "Because I CC'd them on the email." Silence. Total, absolute silence on the line. Then I heard a scuffle. The phone was snatched away from Sarah. "Bill." It was Jason. He sounded unhinged. He sounded like a man who was watching his net worth evaporate in real time. "You son of a bitch." Jason screamed. "You did this on purpose. You waited. You sat there and waited until the closing day." "Hello, Jason," I said. "I see you finally read the email." "I'm going to kill you," he shrieked. "I'm going to sue you into the ground. I'm sending the police to your house. This is sabotage. This is cyber terrorism." "It's compliance, Jason," I said coldly. "You wanted me out. You said I was a dinosaur. You said the legacy code was a liability. Well, I removed the liability. You should be thanking me." "Bill, stop it," he pleaded, the anger instantly morphing into desperation. "We're friends. We're brothers. Remember? The garage? You can't do this to me. I'm leveraged, Bill. I borrowed against the stock to buy the house in the Hamptons. If this deal fails, I lose everything. Everything. You should have thought about that before you slid that severance package across the table," I said. "I'll give you whatever you want," Jason babbled. "You want her job back? It's yours. We'll fire Tyler. We'll make you CTO again. Double salary. Just give me the key code." "I don't want the job, Jason. I'm retired. Remember? Then what? Money? I'll give you $1 million cash. Right now. Wire transfer." "I don't want $1 million," I said. "I want a meeting. A meeting. In 1 hour," I said. "At the tower. You, the board, and the Omni Logistics legal team. Don't let them leave. They're trying to leave right now. Jason cried. They're packing up. Tell them to wait, I said. Tell them the owner of the technology is coming in to facilitate the sale. What sale? We already have a sale. No, Jason, I said. You have a sale for the furniture and the logo. I'm coming to sell them the engine. I hung up. My hand was shaking slightly as I put the receiver down. Not from fear, from adrenaline. The arrow had flown. It had hit the target dead center. I stood up. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself. 62 years old. Gray hair. Lines around the eyes. I didn't look like a dinosaur. I looked like a shark. I went to my desk and picked up the red folder containing the original 1998 agreement. I checked my pocket to make sure the USB drive with the encryption key was there. I walked out to the Volvo. The drive to the city usually took 40 minutes. Today, it took an hour because the traffic was snarled. I passed 3 Apex delivery trucks pulled over on the side of the highway, hazard lights flashing. The drivers were standing outside, looking at their phones, confused. I felt a pang of guilt for them. They were innocent. But in war, the infantry always suffers for the general's mistakes. I pulled into the Apex Tower parking garage. The security guard at the gate, an old guy named Mike who I had known for 10 years, waved me down. Mr. Reynolds, Mike said, leaning out of his booth. Thank God you're here. Is it true? Is the whole system fried? My scanner won't even open the gate. It's a glitch, Mike, I said. I'm going up to fix it. Go get him, boss, he said, manually lifting the barrier arm. I parked my Volvo in the visitor spot. I grabbed the red folder. I walked into the lobby. The chaos was palpable. People were running around with laptops. The receptionist was on the phone, looking near tears. I don't know, sir, she was saying. I don't know when it will be back up. She saw me. She froze. Mr. Reynolds, she whispered. They said you did this. I'm here to undo it, I said. Badge me. She didn't ask for ID this time. She printed a badge that said access, all areas. I took the elevator. The ride up to the 45th floor felt incredibly long. I watched the floor numbers tick up. 10, 20, 30. I was about to walk into a room full of people who hated me, people who wanted to sue me, people who thought I was obsolete. But I held the only thing that mattered. I held the truth. The elevator dinged at 45. The doors slid open. The open collaboration space was a panic zone. The young engineers were huddled in groups, whispering. Tyler, the beanie-wearing CTO, was standing by a server rack in the hallway, screaming into a phone. I tried sudo reboot. I tried flushing the DNS. It's a hard lock. It's encrypted at the kernel level. He saw me step off the elevator. He stopped screaming. He looked at me like I was a ghost. You, Tyler breathed. You locked it. I didn't lock it, son, I said, walking past him without stopping. I just took my key back. There's a difference. I walked straight to the main conference room. The glass walls were fogged with the collective stress of the people inside. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first, stale coffee, sweat, and expensive cologne. The room was crowded. Jason was at the head of the table, his face buried in his hands. Sarah was pacing by the window. 3 men in gray suits, the Omni Logistics team, were standing by the door, briefcases in hand, looking like they were debating whether to call the FBI. The room went silent when I entered. Jason looked up. His eyes were red. He looked like he had aged 20 years since our last meeting. Bill, he rasped. I didn't answer him. I walked to the table. I threw the red folder onto the polished redwood surface. It landed with a heavy, authoritative thud. I looked at the Omni lawyers. I picked out the leader, a tall man with silver hair and eyes like flint. Gentlemen, I said, unbuttoning my blazer and taking a seat at the opposite end of the table from Jason. I apologize for the service interruption. It seems there was a clerical error regarding the licensing of the core technology. Clerical error? The lead lawyer scoffed. Your CEO just told us you held the company hostage. I'm not the CEO, Jason interrupted, his voice cracking. He is, or he was. He's a disgruntled former employee. I am Bill Reynolds, I said to the lawyer. I'm the architect of the Apex kernel. And as of 10 a.m. this morning, I am the sole, unencumbered owner of the intellectual property you are trying to acquire. I pointed to the red folder. That is the chain of title, I said. you'll find that Apex Systems has been operating on a revocable license for 22 years. A license that Jason Sterling allowed to expire. The lawyer stepped forward. He picked up the folder. He opened it. He began to read. The room held its breath. I watched Jason. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the lawyer, praying for a loophole, praying for a miracle. But I knew there were no miracles in that folder. Only physics. The lawyer looked up. He looked at Jason. Then he looked at me. Mr. Sterling, the lawyer said, his voice ice cold. You represented in Exhibit A that Apex owned all proprietary code. We do. Jason stammered. He wrote it while he worked here. It's work for hire. Not according to this, the lawyer said, tapping the document. This is an explicit carve-out. Sole personal property. Revocable upon termination. The lawyer closed the folder. This is fraud, he said to Jason. Material misrepresentation. The deal is off. No. Jason stood up, knocking his chair over. You can't walk away. We have a signed letter of intent. Based on false pretenses, the lawyer said. He turned to his team. Let's go. Wait, I said. The lawyer stopped. He looked at me. You want the tech? I said. You know it works. You've seen the metrics. You saw the diligence reports. We want the tech, the lawyer agreed. But we can't buy from a company that doesn't own it. Then don't, I said. I leaned forward. Buy it from me. The silence that followed my offer was heavy enough to crush bone. Buy it from you? Vance repeated. He didn't sound shocked. He sounded calculating. He was a transactional lawyer, a predator in a $3,000 suit. He didn't care about morality. He didn't care about friendship. He cared about assets and liabilities. Right now, Apex Systems was a liability. I was the asset. You can't be serious. Jason erupted. He scrambled around the table, putting himself between me and the Omni team. This is tortious interference. He's interfering with a contract. You can't negotiate with him. Vance looked at Jason with the kind of expression usually reserved for a waiter who has spilled soup on a lap. Mr. Sterling, sit down. I am the CEO, Jason shouted, his voice cracking into a high, desperate register. I control this sale. You control nothing, Vance said, his voice dropping an octave. You represented that Apex on the IP. That was a lie. As of this moment, our letter of intent is void. We're not buying Apex. We are terminating discussions due to bad faith dealing. He turned his back on Jason and looked at me. Mr. Reynolds, let's talk. No. Jason grabbed Vance's arm. It was a mistake. Vance's security detail, two men who had been standing silently by the door, stepped forward instantly. They didn't touch Jason, but they occupied the space around him so completely that he shrank back against the whiteboard. Go ahead, Mr. Reynolds, Vance said, straightening his cuff. You're offering a direct asset sale? Simple transaction, I said, leaning back in the chair. I own the kernel. You own the kernel. I sell it to Omni Logistics. You get the source code, the encryption keys, and a 12-month consulting contract for me to ensure the transition to your cloud environment is actually functional. And the price? Vance asked. $500 million, I said. Jason let out a strangled noise. That's the whole deal. That's the valuation of the entire company. Correction, I said to Jason, not looking at him. That was the valuation of the monopoly. The monopoly lives in my code. The rest of this. I waved my hand around the glass room, indicating the building, the beanbag chairs, the marketing department. This is just overhead. Vance nodded slowly. And what happens to Apex? Apex is a shell, I said. Without the license, they can't operate. They'll file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy within the week. The assets will be liquidated. And the employees? Sarah spoke up. She had been standing by the window, pale and silent. Now she moved toward the table. Bill, we have 300 people. If Apex liquidates, they lose everything. Their jobs, their 401ks. I looked at Sarah. She was complicit, yes. She had sided with Jason. But she wasn't the architect of the betrayal. She was just a suit following the money. That's part of the deal, I said to Vance. Omni agrees to hire the engineering staff. The real engineers. I'll give you the list. Not the ninjas. Not the brand consultants. The people who maintain the servers. You hire them at their current salaries. Vance pursed his lips. We need the head count anyway. That's acceptable. And investors? Jason whispered. He had collapsed into a chair, staring at the table. My equity, the Series A, B, C partners. They take a loss, I said brutally. That's the risk of investing in a founder who doesn't read his contracts. You're destroying me, Jason whispered. Tears were actually leaking out of his eyes now. Bill, I'll have nothing. The lawsuits, the debt. You have your health, Jason, I said. And you have your golf game. I turned back to Vance. Do we have a deal? Vance looked at the red folder. He looked at his watch. Then he looked at the massive monitor on the wall, which was still displaying the global map of stopped trucks. One condition, Vance said. I need proof of life. I need to see it work. Right now, before we sign a letter of intent. Fair, I said. I reached into my blazer pocket. I pulled out a small, silver USB drive. It looked like nothing. You could buy it at a pharmacy for $10. But the data inside was worth $500 million. I stood up and walked over to the main terminal in the corner of the room, the one connected to the wall display. Jason watched me. He looked like he wanted to tackle me. But the security guards were watching him, and the fight had gone out of him. He was witnessing his own funeral, and he was powerless to stop the eulogy. I plugged the USB drive into the console. I opened the command prompt. The room went deadly silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. I typed in the directory path. Mount/vol/key_master. The drive spun up. I executed the restoration script. Execute. Restore_license.sh. Key file equals auth.key. The screen scrolled text faster than the eye could follow. Validating signature. Okay. Decrypting kernel. Okay. Handshake protocol. Initiated. I hit the final key. Enter. We all turned to the big screen. For 5 agonizing seconds, the map remained red. The critical failure banners pulsed. Then, a single green dot appeared in New Jersey. System handshake received, I said softly. Then a cluster in Chicago turned green. Then Los Angeles. Then Dallas. Like a wave of life washing over a dead planet, the red receded. The error messages vanished, replaced by the calming, rhythmic scrolling of routing logs. System status online. Optimization engine active. Latency 12 milliseconds. The trucks were moving again. The blood was flowing. Incredible, Vance muttered. It really is instant. It's math, I said, pulling the USB drive out. Math doesn't negotiate. I walked back to the table and held out the drive to Vance. Draft the papers, I said. I want the wire transfer to an escrow account within 48 hours. Once the funds clear, I give you the physical key and the admin passwords. Vance took the drive. He held it like it was a diamond. We'll have the paperwork ready by end of day, Vance said. He extended a hand. Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Reynolds. I shook his hand. Likewise. I didn't shake Jason's hand. I didn't shake Sarah's hand. I walked to the door. Bill, Jason called out. His voice was a broken rasp. I stopped, my hand on the glass door handle. Why, he asked. We could have fixed this. I would have given you anything. Why burn it all down? I turned around slowly. I looked at him, the man I had trusted, the man I had built a life with, the man who had looked me in the eye and called me obsolete. You didn't burn it down, Jason, I said. You just forgot to pay the electric bill. I walked out. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The ride was smooth. When I stepped out into the lobby, the chaos had vanished. The receptionist was smiling again. The phones had stopped ringing. The system was up. The world was normal. Nobody knew that the ownership of the entire company had just changed hands in a room 45 floors above their heads. Nobody knew that the CEO was currently hyperventilating in a chair, facing bankruptcy and fraud charges. They just knew their screens worked again. I walked out to the parking lot. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the asphalt. I got into my Volvo. I tossed the red folder onto the passenger seat. I started the engine. I wasn't going to go home to my empty house. Not tonight. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Hello. A woman's voice. Cautious. Hi, Maggie, I said. It's Bill. Bill? Is everything okay? My ex-wife sounded worried. She had probably seen the news about the outage. "Everything is fine," I said. "Actually, everything is perfect. I was wondering if you and the kids wanted to get dinner. Maybe that Italian place you used to like." "Bill, we haven't." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said. "I retired today. For real this time. I have a lot of free time. And I realized I have some making up to do." There was a silence on the line. Then a soft laugh. "Okay, Bill. The Italian place. 7 o'clock. I'll be there," I said. I hung up. I put the car in gear and drove out of the Apex Systems lot for the last time. I didn't look back at the tower. I didn't look back at the Empire. I left Jason to his ruins. I left the lawyers to their paperwork. I drove toward the city, merging into the flow of traffic that was moving smoothly, efficiently, optimized by a ghost in the machine that finally had a name. I turned on the radio. I was 62 years old. I was alone, but as the city lights flickered on around me, I realized something. I wasn't a dinosaur. I was the meteor, and the dust was just starting to settle.